Nearly 2 years after the bombings on Boylston, Boston is ready to begin a new tradition, giving back to honor the lives that were lost and the lives that were forever changed.
From now on, April 15th will be known as One Boston Day. It will be a day of compassion and generosity.
Boston strong!
What will happen on One Boston Day? Well, there will be ceremonies, a moment of silence, and special banners will be hoisted on Boylston Street. Everyone in the city is being asked to perform a random act of kindness on the 15th.
The moment remains so emotional, so raw for so many people, some of whom were not even there, yet feel the effects of those bomb blasts in their everyday lives. The Boston Marathon bombing didn't just affect people in New England. It reached around the globe and left so many wondering why. More than just why, but why an event filled with so much joy and dedication can be ripped into so easily and changed forever. On this anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing, let's welcome into MidPoint the syndicated talk show host of the Howie Carr Radio Network, one of the best I ever heard, as well as a columnist at the Boston Herald, Howie Carr. Pleasure to talk to you today, Howie.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks for having me on.
I was fortunate to live in Boston for 4 years. Got to know the people, walked those streets many times. And I know a lot of people involved with the marathon, and it affected me. I didn't grow up there, and even that had just such an impact. But you've been in that city your whole life. You've always been there. 2 years later, what comes to mind? What are the emotions that bubble up now?
Well, just sadness, I guess, that the people that were killed have now been dead for 2 years. I was thinking about it before we did this live shot. Little Martin Richard, the boy, he was 8 years old. Today, if he were alive, he'd only be 10 years old. And I was just thinking about the horrific autopsy photos that they showed the jury during the trial, which ended last week with a guilty verdict for Tsarnaev. And his intestines were hanging out of his body. They took his little New England Patriots brown T-shirt out of the bag that the medical examiner had brought, and they showed it to the jury. It was totally caked with blood. It was just a horrible thing. They had his father was a witness, Bill Richard, and he talked about how they put the bomb right behind the entire Richard family, and it killed the little son, Martin Richard, that I just told you about. Jane Richard, the daughter, she was 6. Her leg was blown off. His wife, Denise Richard, she lost an eye to a piece of shrapnel, and he told the jury when he was testifying, Bill Richard, he said he knew that if he didn't get to Jane, his daughter, they were going to lose her too. She was going to bleed to death. So he said, I turned to Denise, and she was trying to comfort Martin, and I said, Jane will be okay. And then Bill Richard said, and then I turned around and I looked at my son for the last time. I mean, it was just heart-wrenching testimony all through the trial. There were 5 people altogether who were witnesses who had lost one or more limbs, and they were all courageous, and they showed a lot of courage, really, and they bounced back as best they can. And all sorts of emotions are going through everybody's minds. Everybody's remembering where they were when they heard what they did, how they were affected. The entire city was shut down for part of Friday when they were closing in on the 2 terrorists.
Dzhokhar Tsarnaev found guilty, all counts, and now we still wait for the sentencing phase. But is it fair to say that the city of Boston, Howie, though, is still kind of holding its breath a little bit because we're still waiting for that last shoe, that people are still just not quite ready to let that go yet? They want this to be done.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think there's a great interest in the case about whether or not he's going to get the death penalty or not. It seemed that there were several people who might be inclined to fall for the Rolling Stone description of him, the description of him by a Northeastern criminology professor last week as a quote unquote handsome lad. But no, they didn't. They only took 11 hours to convict him. So I think a lot of people are hoping for the best. I mean, we all know he's not going to be executed, but it would be nice to have the death penalty at least imposed upon him. And as you said, Eddie, this is not just a local story. There was a witness, an FBI agent during the trial, who was the head of the IT department for the FBI, when they posted the video, the surveillance video of the two bombers when they were trying to identify them. I think that was on Thursday after the bombing on Monday. In the first 24 hours that was on the FBI website, they got 24 million hits. The agent described it as totally unprecedented. It's the trial's being covered by people and reporters around the world.
I only got a couple of minutes left here, Howie, but when something like this happens, it takes a little from all of us. It takes a little bit of that innocence away. And the marathon, such a great day to go to the marathon, the ball game, so much that's around it. Do you get the sense that 2 years later, even though the city's healing, that there's a part of that innocence that the city's never going to get back again?
Well, I think a disaster like this, or an atrocity, it's not a disaster, it's an atrocity. It was a terrorist attack. I think the city is recovering, but it does take a measure out of people. I mean, there were, that day 2 years ago today, the bombing was actually at 2:49. There's going to be a moment of silence observed in the city. There were limbs all over Boylston Street. If you've lived in Boston, you know where Boylston Street is. It's one of the major thoroughfares in one of the nicer parts of town.
Yep.
And one of my experts that I have on my radio show described it. He said it was the worst carnage in terms of lost limbs since a World War II battle. It was like artillery was going off in the midst of a festival. And that's what it was. I mean, they put shrapnel, ball bearings, pieces of metal, and pieces of wood in these pressure cooker kettles, and then just left them right in front of families. I mean, it was totally outrageous what these people did. There was an arrest a couple of weeks ago of two alleged Muslim terrorist women in Brooklyn, and the FBI recorded them as saying, why did those people in Boston blow up a festival full of civilians? I mean, even Muslim terrorists.
Yeah, they still talk about it to this day, and you still can't comprehend it sometime. Howie, I got to remind everybody that we are going to carry the moment of silence here. It's a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you, and I stand with my friends in Boston for so many years. I'm there today in spirit. Howie, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Eddie, and thanks for standing with us.
All right, take care. Boston strong, my friend. Clinton's mystery machine. Maybe those meddling kids can figure out how to unwipe an email server. We'll talk about that and more when we continue right here on MidPoint.